Let's do that. All right, guys. Sorry about that. I'm kind of in limbo between trying different stream. And I like Restream because it goes to my YouTube channel too. So it makes my life a little bit easier. So what we're doing is we're identifying a browser attack in this CompTIA lab. So an interception proxy is software that sits between a client and server. A man-in-the-middle or on-path attack allows requests from the client and responses from the server to be analyzed and modified. In this activity, we will use the interception proxy burp site, portswigger.net, to probe a web application for weaknesses and show how allowing a simple script to run can compromise browser security. Next, you will see the steps behind intercepting an email password reset attempt. All right. So in the first part of this activity, you will see how cross-site scripting attacks take advantage of web applications that process user input to form the HTML output in some way. There are usually two sources of inputs: user-typed input through a form or control, parsing and interpreting parameters from a URL. Cross-site scripting vulnerability testing on a website will consequently focus primarily on script-based pages such as PHP and on forms. You'll use burp site to probe a user form for cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. The form is hosted on Multidale, which is intentionally vulnerable web application created by OWASP. GitHub.com, great website. Highly recommended. Okay, Multilidae contains pages with language that some may find offensive. If you are offended by bad language, please skip this activity. Okay, so if you guys don't like bad language, don't watch. Okay, I warned you. User discretion is advised. Recall that you cannot use the automatic type text feature with Linux virtual machines, and that all commands and input in Linux are case sensitive. Linux commands will be displayed by using the monospace font hostname. Okay, so put there. Again, you know, if you guys have this as your password, rethink your life. Inside that. All right. Let's do this full screen. All right. So we're opening Firefox CSR, the browser bar. I already got a 0 there. All right, we're going to set the burp site and configure the proxy to intercept requests. Open the burp site suite, burp suite, desktop shortcut. All right, guys, once again, the language apparently is bad on this site. I just want to give you guys a disclaimer. If you feel uncomfortable about that, please don't watch my content on this specific video. If you want, I will try and give you guys ample time to not watch. All right. So we're going to accept the license on Burp Suite. Let's see. Where is my Firefox? That is not my Firefox. I know it. Maybe it's up here. Top. All right. All right. Frick, where'd that one go? I didn't tell you you could minimize. What the frick? Okay, I've broken everything, apparently. Okay, there's Burp Suite. Okay. Okay. So we got Burp Suite open. We've got oh really? You won't let me paste that? So this is what James was showing us with Burp Suite last time. I did this in a video earlier. Web page will not load. This is expected because Burp Suite is intercepting the browser request. Note the page file extension PHP is a scripting language widely used to create web applications. Okay, note the page's file extension PHP, hypertext, preprocessor is a scripting language. Yep. Let's see, Burp Suite Note the content of what the browser is sending to the server. Simple page request along with some information about itself. Select the forward button. Forward. In the browser, type a message into the box. It's not letting me. Okay, I guess the page doesn't work. Okay, moving on. Test injection vulnerability. If you want to probe this site for injection vulnerabilities, a basic test is to try to use some JavaScript to show an alert. In Burp Suite, select the HTTP history tab. Locate the post record, then right-click and send a repeater. Okay, so because this won't work, I can't do any of this. Well, that sucks. So whatever. I gotta go on to the next thing. All right. Test URL interception vulnerability. In this test, you will intercept a mock email password reset attempt. Imagine the user has submitted a password reset form for the email account. All right. All right, so we gotta select Firefox. All right. Let's go back here. Let's got the username. Uh-oh. All right, there we go. Oh, go. Go. All right. Let me try and do this. It's awkward. I should have had Burp Suite up. Right. Next. I don't know if it's going to read this. Okay. In the proxy tab. Let's try and do this again. Okay. Locate the GET record that corresponds to email sent. Reset attempt. Right click the GET record. Send to repeater. Select a repeater tab. Repeater tab. Request panel, select the params tab. And the email value field. Okay, so we just changed the destination email. HTTP history target? No. Proxy? No. Let's forget. Oh yeah, proxy. Select HTTP history. Display the final host connection. Okay. User version. The email value is displayed for the alt email name. I don't know. Save that. Which of the following answers best explains why the URL is vulnerable? Can be Let's see. So HTTPS was not in use. Destination. I would say it can be intercepted, edited, and forwarded on. Well, which of the following answers best describes the process of URL injection attack against Jan Smith's email password reset attempt? Attacker intercepted, edited password reset URL, then forwarded on to the email service with changed information. That sounds legit. Attacker redirected password reset URL to their own database and stored the new password there. No, attacker intercepted password reset, edited a new password. Changed information. I would say attacker intercepted, edited password reset. There we go. Boom. Submit. All right, next. Whew. Already did that though. All right, it's gonna take a little bit. Let's go to the labs section. Do this. Which lab? All right, that's no longer available. Okay. Here we go. Hey, look, I got a knowledge goal. Hooray. Data exposure and memory management. All right. I wonder if it skipped anything in the lessons. Let's go down here. It does that sometimes. Yeah, it skipped it. All right, I'll be right back, guys. Is there any way I can add a page? So I just stop screen sharing, disable camera? No. Okay. Well, sorry guys, I'm trying to learn how this thing works. All right. Anyways. On to the secure cookies. I just had a cookie. It was really good. With web applications, special attention must be paid to secure cookies and options for HTTP response header security. Secure cookies can be a vector for session hijacking, data exposure not configured correctly. Some of the key parameters for the set cookie header are: avoid using persistent cookies for session authentication, always use a new cookie. The user reauthenticates, set the secure attribute to prevent a cookie being sent over an encrypted HTTP, set the HTTP only attribute to make the cookie inaccessible, document object model, client-side scripting. Use the same site attribute to control from where a cookie may be present, may be sent. Let's see. Oh, hey. I forgot to say hello. Hello. Hello, hello. All right. So we're going to use the same site attribute to control from where a cookie may be sent. There's something in, I think it was like LinkedIn, there was a news header that they're trying to get rid of cookies. I don't know if that's going to actually happen, though. Cookies are just so integral to everything. But basically, the lines were like cookies are kind of like an invasion of privacy, was the argument that was made. I don't know if they'll actually get rid of cookies, though. Number of security options can be set in the response header returned by the server to the client. Well, it should seem like a straightforward case of enabling all these. Developers are often constrained by compatibility and implementation considerations between different client, browser, and server software types and versions. Some of the most important security relevant header options are HTTP strict transport security, which forces browsers to connect using HTTPS only. Content security policy mitigates clickjacking, script injection, and other client-side attacks. Cache control sets whether the browser can cache responses, prevent caching of data project, protects confidential and personal information where the client device might be shared by multiple users. Cool. Data exposure and memory management. Data exposure is a fault that allows privileged information such as token password or personal data to be read without being subject to the appropriate access controls. Applications must only transmit such data between authenticated hosts using cryptography to protect the session. When incorporating encryption in your code, it's important to use encryption algorithms and techniques that are known to be strong rather than creating your own. Error handling. A well-written application must be able to handle errors and exceptions gracefully. This means that the application performs in a controlled way when something unpredictable happens. An error or exception could be caused by invalid user input, a loss in network connectivity, another server or process failing, and so on. Ideally, the programmer will have written a structured exception handler to dictate what the application should then do. Each procedure can have multiple exception handlers. Some handlers will deal with anticipated errors and exceptions. There should also be a catch-all handler that will deal with the unexpected. Main goal must be for the application not to fail in a way that allows the attacker to execute code, perform some sort of injection attack. One infamous example of a poorly written exception handler is the Apple Go To bug. Another issue is that an application's interpreter may default to a standard handler and display default error messages when something goes wrong. This may reveal platform information and the inner workings of code to an attacker. It's better for an application to use custom error handlers so that the developer can choose the amount of information shown when an error is caused. Memory management. Many arbitrary code attacks depend on the target application having faulty memory management procedures. This allows the attacker to execute his or her own code in the space marked out by the target application. There are known unsecure practices for memory management that should be avoided and checked for processing untrusted inputs such as strings to ensure that it cannot overwrite areas of memory. Secure code usage. Developing code to perform some function is hard work, so developers will often look to see if someone else has done that work already. Program may make use of existing code in the following ways. Code reuse, using a block of code from elsewhere in the same application or from another application to perform a different function or perform the same function in a different context. The risk here is that the copy and paste approach causes the developer to overlook potential vulnerabilities. Third-party library, using a binary package such as a dynamic link library that implements some sort of standard functionality such as establishing a network connection or performing cryptography. Each library must be monitored for vulnerabilities and patched promptly. Software development kit, using sample code or libraries of pre-built functions from the programming environment used to create the software or interact with a third-party API. As with other third-party libraries or code, it is imperative to monitor for vulnerabilities. Stored procedures, using a pre-built function to perform a database query. A stored procedure is a part of a database that executes a custom query. Procedure is applied and input by the calling program and returns a predefined output for matched records. This can provide a more secure means of querying the database. Any stored procedures that are part of the database but not required by the application should be disabled. Oh, oops. Other secure coding practices, input and error handling plus secure reuse of existing code covers some of the main security-related development practices that you should be aware of. There are a few others that can arise during the development and deployment of application code. Unreachable code and dead code. Unreachable code is a part of application source code that can never be executed. For example, there may be a routine within a logic statement, if, then, that can never be called because the conditions that would call it can never be met. Dead code is executed, but has no effect on the program flow. This type of code may be introduced through carelessly reused code or when a block of code is written or changed. Unreachable and dead code should be removed from the application to forestall the possibility that it could be misused in some ways. The presence of unreachable dead code can indicate that the application is not being well maintained. Obfuscation, camouflage. It's important that code be well documented. To assist the effort of multiple programmers working on the same project, well-documented code is also easier to analyze, however, which may assist the development of attacks. Code can be made difficult to analyze by using an obfuscator, which is software that randomizes the names of variables, constants, functions, and procedures, removes comments and white space, and performs other operations to make the compiled code physically and mentally difficult to read and follow. This sort of technique might be used to make reverse engineering an application more difficult and as a way of disguising malware code. Static code analysis. Development is only one stage in the software lifecycle. This is what James was talking about earlier. A new release of an application or automation script should be audited to ensure that it meets the goals of confidentiality, integrity, and availability critical to any secure computer system. Static code analysis is performed against application code before it is packaged as an executable process. The analysis software must support the programming language used by the source code. The software will scan the source code for signatures of known issues, such as OWASP, top 10 most critical web application security risks, or injection vulnerabilities generally. NIST maintains a list of source code analyzers and their key features. Human analysis of software code is described as manual code review. It is important that the code be reviewed by developers, peers, other than the original coders to try to identify. So do a peer review. Wow, code review. To identify oversights, mistaken assumptions, or lack of knowledge or experience. It is important to establish a collaborative environment in which reviews can take place effectively. So obviously, don't want to be a jerk when you're going over somebody's code. Just like say, hey, like this might be your problem. Don't bash them over how bad their coding is. All right. Dynamic code analysis. Static code review techniques will not reveal vulnerabilities that might exist in runtime environments, such as exposure to race conditions or unexpected user input. Dynamic analysis means that the application is tested under real-world conditions using a staging environment. Fuzzing is a means of testing that an application's input validation routines work well. Fuzzing means that the test or vulnerability scanner generates large amounts of deliberately invalid or random input and records the responses made by the application as a form of stress testing that can reveal how robust the application is. There are generally 3 types of fuzzers representing different ways of injecting manipulated input into the application. Application UI, identify input streams accepted by the application, such as input boxes, command line switches, or import-export functions. Protocol, transmit manipulated packets to the application, perhaps using unexpected values in the headers or payload. File format, attempt to open files whose format has been manipulated, perhaps manipulating specific features of the file. Fuzzers are also distinguished by the way in which they craft each input or test case. A fuzzer may use semi-random input, dumb fuzzer, or might craft specific input based around known exploit vectors such as escape command sequences or character literals, or by mutating intercepted inputs. Associated with the fuzzing is the concept of stress testing an application to see how an application performs under extreme performance or usage scenarios. Finally, the fuzzer needs some means of detecting an application crash and reporting which input sequence generated the crash. So this is using Burp Suite. List of strings for the payload of fuzzing test and Burp Suite. So it looks like Burp Suite's pretty good there. All right. Implement secure script environments. As a security technician, you often have to develop automation scripts using a range of programming and scripting languages. Scripts can be used to return critical security assessment data and to configure hosts, so it is important that only validated code can be executed. You should also be able to identify malicious code in scripts and macros. All right. What type of programming practice defends against injection stylus attacks, such as inserting SQL commands? I mean, it's cross-site scripting. Input validation provides mitigation against this type of input being passed to an application via user form. Output encoding could provide another layer of protection by checking that the query that the script passes to the database is safe. No, I did not get that one right. What coding practice provides specific mitigation against cross-site scripting? Obfuscation, camouflage. Output encoding ensures that strings are made safe for the context that they are being passed to, such as when a JavaScript variable provides output to render as HTML. Safe means that the string does not contain unauthorized syntax elements such as script tags. No, I did not get that right. You're discussing execution and validation security for DOM scripting with the web team. A junior team member wants to know if this relates to client-side or server-side code. What is your response? DOM side. Document object model is the means by which a JavaScript can change the way a page is rendered. As this is changed by the browser, it is client-side code. I didn't say, I'll just say no. I was thinking client-side, but I said DOM, so I'll just be like, nope. Which response header provides protection against SSL scripting attacks? Response header. HTTP strict transport security. What vulnerabilities might default error messages reveal? Information about the server, all that stuff. Default error message might reveal platform information, the workings of the code to an attacker. Kind of. What is an SDK and how does it affect secure development? I've seen SDK before, but I don't know. Software development kit contains tools and code. Examples are released by a vendor to make developing applications within a particular environment easier. Any element in the SDK could contain vulnerabilities that could be transferred to the developers or applications. Just so you know. What type of dynamic testing tool would you use to check for input validation on a web form? Burp Suite or Fuzzer? Yeah. Fuzzer can be used to submit known unsafe strings and randomized input to test whether they are made safe by input validation or not. Kind of. Just say kind of. Whoa, whoa, whoa. We just skipped into Python? What? Let's see. I feel like I skipped a bunch, so I was like, yeah. See, it does it. I don't know why it does that, but it skips sometimes. Oh my gosh, man, it feels like these sections never end. It's gonna be great when I stop having class because then I'll have more time to study all this stuff. And my test June 18th. Oh, I'm so screwed. All right, I'll be right back. Python's pretty big. Everybody loves the Python. I don't know why yet, because I've never used it. Sorry about that, guys. I am being a little fatty, eating all the cookies. Those freaking oatmeal chocolate chip cookies my wife makes is just too good. Ah. All right. So we're going into scripting automation. Using scripting means that each configuration or build task is performed by a block of code. The script will take standard arguments as data. So there's less scope for uncertainty over configuration choices leading to errors. The script will use the following elements. Parameters that the script takes as input data, pass the script as arguments, branching and looping statements that can alter the flow of execution based on logic conditions, validation and error handlers to check inputs and ensure robust execution, unit tests to ensure that the script returns the expected outputs given the expected inputs. Popular scripting languages for information include PowerShell, Python, JavaScript, Ruby, and Go. So I've heard of Ruby, I've heard of Python, PowerShell. Scripting will also make use of specific domain-specific languages such as SQL, XML parsing, regex, and orchestration tools. I haven't heard of those guys. Scripting language like Python is a general purpose or procedural language. It can be adapted to perform many tasks. domain-specific language performs a particular task, such as regex. String parsing orchestration manages multiple automation scripts and configuration data to provision a service. All coding languages have a specific syntax that constrains the way sections of code are laid out in blocks and the standard statements that are available, such as branching and looping instructions. Python script environment. Python is a popular language for implementing all kinds of development projects, including automation tools and security tools, as well as malicious scripts. Python.org. Where many languages use brackets to denote blocks of code, Python uses indentation 4 spaces per level by convention. Any statement that starts a block is delimited by a colon. Python is case sensitive. For example, a variable user cannot be referred to by label user or user. Comment lines are marked by hashtag character. You can view inline help on model functions and keywords using the help statement. For example, following command shows help for print function help print. All right, Python uses the equal sign operator to assign a name to a variable. Names are not declared with a data type such as string or integer, but Python is strongly typed, meaning that you cannot add an integer variable to a string variable. For instance, string literals can be delimited using single or double quotes. Functions are used to produce modular reusable code. A function takes some arguments as parameters, performs some processing, and typically returns some output. When creating a script, you will use some functions from Python's modules and define your own functions. A function is defined using the following indentation syntax. Branching and looping statements let you test conditions and perform repetitive actions using compact code. Python uses the following comparison operators. Python uses only if for branching logic through complex nested conditions can be simplified with else and elif. Else if. Elif. Elsa. What? Oh, I ate way too many cookies. I hate myself now. A Python module is a library of functions for accomplishing standard tasks such as opening a network socket or interacting with an operating system API. One of the perceived strengths of Python is the huge number of modules. For example, the OS module contains functions to interact with the operating system, while the socket module handles network connections and the URL module opens and parses resource addresses. Various extension modules allow a Python script to interact with Windows APIs. The presence of 2 malicious libraries within a Python repository illustrates the potential risk of third-party code. Python is an interpreted language executed within the context of a binary Python process in Windows, a Python script, .py. Okay, I've seen those before. Not a lot, but I've seen it recently. It can be called via python.exe within a command window or python w.exe with no command window. Python script can also be compiled to a standalone Windows executable using the py2exe extension. This executable can be digitally signed. PowerShell is a preferred method of performing Windows administration tasks. Why do they start talking about this like way late in the game? Like I was asking about PowerShell from the get-go, like what's the difference? And now it's so late. I've spent months doing this and asking my instructors. I don't know. I feel like the table of contents needs to be rearranged to like tell people who don't know much about anything with computers so that it can be tailored to help them understand how to use the stuff. I don't know. Just kind of a complaint I have. Anyways, it has also become the Windows hacker's go-to toolkit. PowerShell statements can be executed at a PowerShell prompt or run as a script on any PowerShell-enabled host. I've seen that script.ps1. The Git help commandlet shows help on different elements of the PowerShell environment. PowerShell is case insensitive. Most PowerShell usage is found on commandlets. A commandlet is a compiled library that exposes some configuration or administrative tasks, such as starting a VM in Hyper-V. Commandlets use a verb-noun naming convention. Commandlets always return as an object. Typically, the return from a commandlet will be piped to some other commandlet or function, for example, get, tech process, where, format list. You can also define simple functions for use within your scripts. Custom functions are declared within curly brackets. Curly bracket. Curly bracket. Note that a variable is declared by prefixing a label with $sign. Logic and looping statements. PowerShell supports a wider range of branching and looping structures than Python, including the switch and do statements. Curly brackets are used to structure the statements. PowerShell uses textual operators, modules. PowerShell can also be used with a large number of modules, which are added to a script using the import module commandlet. Cool. Execution control. Execution control is the process of determining what additional software or scripts may be installed or run on a host beyond its baseline. Allow and block lists. Execution control can be implemented as either an allow list or block list. Allow list is a highly restricted policy that means only running authorized processes and scripts, allowing only specific applications that have been added to a list will inevitably hamper users at some point and increase support time and cost. For example, a user might need to install a conferencing application at short notice. Block list is a permissive policy that only prevents execution of listed processes and scripts. It is vulnerable to software that has not previously been identified as malicious or capable of or vulnerable to malicious use. Code signing. Code signing is the principal means of proving the authenticity and integrity of code, an executable or script. The developer creates a cryptographic hash of a file, then signs the hash using his or her private key. The program is shipped with a copy of the developer's code signing certificate, which contains a public key that the destination computer uses to read and verify signature. The operating system then prompts the user to choose whether to accept the signature and run the program. OS-based execution control is often enforced using a third-party security product, but there are some built-in Windows features that can perform the task. Software restriction policy available for most versions and editions of Windows SRP can be configured as group policy objects to pass list file system locations from which executables and scripts can launch. Rules can also be configured by publisher signature by file hash. There's also support for creating block list-based rules. App Locker improves configuration options and default usage of SRP. Notably, App Locker policies can be applied to user and group accounts rather than just computer accounts. However, App Locker GPOs can only be configured for Enterprise and Ultimate editions of Windows 7 and later. Windows Defender Application Control, formerly Device Guard. This can be used to create code integrity policies, which can be used on their own or in conjunction with App Locker. CI policies apply to the computer and affect all users. CI policies can be based on version, aware, and publisher digital signatures, as well as image hashes and or file paths. WDAC is a useful option for preventing administrative accounts from disabling execution control options. WDAC is principally configured using XML policy statements in PowerShell. In Windows, execution of PowerShell scripts can be inhibited by the execution policy. Note that the execution policy is not an access control mechanism. It can be bypassed in any number of different ways. WDAC is a robust mechanism for restricting use of potentially dangerous code, such as malicious PowerShell. In Linux, execution control is normally enforced by using a mandatory access control kernel module or Linux security module. The two main LSMs are SELUX Linux and AppArmor. Heard of AppArmor. Let's see, moving on. All right. Let me see what my learning plan's at. Really? All right. All right. I resisted temptation. I was going to get another cookie. I said no. Oh, man. Malicious code indicators, as with buffer overflow, indicators of malicious code execution, are either caught by endpoint protection software or discovered after the fact in logs on how the malware interacted with the network, file system, and registry. If you're performing threat hunting or observing malware in a sandbox, it's helpful to consider main types of malicious activity. Shellcode. This is a minimal program designed to exploit a buffer overflow or similar vulnerability to gain privileges or to drop a backdoor on the host if run as a Trojan. Having gained a foothold, this type of attack will be followed by some type of network connection to download additional tools. Credential dumping. The malware might try to access credentials file SAM on a local Windows workstation or sniff credentials held in memory by the ISIS.exe system process. Lateral movement, insider attack. The general procedure is to use the foothold to execute a process remotely using a tool such as PSEXEC or PowerShell. The attacker might be seeking data assets or may try to widen access by changing the system's security configurations, such as opening a firewall port or creating an account. The attacker has compromised an account. These commands can blend in with ordinary network operations, so they could be anomalous behavior for that account. Persistence. This is a mechanism that allows the threat actor's backdoor to restart if the host reboots or the user logs off. Typical methods are to use auto-run keys in the registry, adding a scheduled task, or using Windows Management Instrumentation event subscriptions. PowerShell malicious indicators. There are numerous exploit frameworks to leverage PowerShell functionality, such as PowerShell Empire, PowerSploit, Metasploit, and Mimikatz. I've used Metasploit. Some suspicious indicators for PowerShell execution include the following: commandlets such as invoke expression, invoke command, invoke WMI method, new service, create thread, start process, new object, and indicate an attempt to run some type of binary shellcode. This is particularly suspicious if combined with a download string or download file argument. One complication is that commandlets can be shortened, assisting obfuscation. All right. Do evil. Bypassing execution policy can also act as an indicator. PowerShell code may be called as a base64 encoded string. DAC, ENC argument, or may use the attack no profile or attack execution policy bypass argument. I have actually used that one, but I use that in Linux, which is weird. Although I was hacking into a Windows system, so that might make more sense. Using system calls to the Windows API might indicate an attempt to inject a DLL or perform process hollowing where the malicious code takes over a legitimate process. Using another type of script to execute the PowerShell is also suspicious. For example, the attacker might use JavaScript code embedded in PDF to launch PowerShell via a vulnerable reader app. The big problem with PowerShell indicators is distinguishing them from legitimate behavior. Following techniques can be used to assist with this. Use group policy to restrict execution of PowerShell to trusted accounts and hosts. Use group policy execution control to run scripts only from trusted locations. Consider use of constrained language mode and sign scripts to limit the ability of exploit code to run on high-value target systems. Use PowerShell logging and the anti-malware scan interface to detect and prevent obfuscated and suspicious code. Prevent the use of old PowerShell versions to mitigate the use of a downgrade attack to bypass access controls. Cool. Bash and Python malicious indicators. Most of the web runs on Linux, and Linux has proven remarkably resilient to attacks, meaning that it is able to withstand or recover quickly from difficult situations, which is why I don't understand why more people don't use Linux. Like even CompTIA recognizes Linux is good. Given the high value of the assets that depend on it, most exploits of Linux systems depend on weak configuration and or vulnerabilities in web applications. In Linux, the command line is usually born again shell bash. Many Linux systems have Python enabled as well. Python scripts or batch files of bash commands can be used for automation tasks such as backup or for malicious purposes, which I think I have used something similar to bash. I know I've used Python scripts for sure in Linux systems. Malicious script running on a Linux host might attempt the following: use commands such as who am I and ifconfig/ip/route to establish the local context. Download tools possibly using wget or curl and cron tab entries to enable persistence. Add a user to sudo and enable remote access via SSH. Change firewall rules using IP tables. Use tools such as nmap to scan for other hosts. A very common factor for attacking Linux hosts is to use an exploit to install web shell as a backdoor. Typical code to implement a reverse shell connecting out to the machine at evil.foo on port 4444 is as follows. The os.do2 statement redirects terminals data streams standard 0, standard 1, and standard 2 to the socket objects S. PTY module provides a library of functions for managing a pseudo terminal, in this case starting the shell process at bin/sh. Code to implement a shell can be obfuscated in numerous ways. One way to identify malicious scripts or to match code samples is to scan the file system against a configuration baseline, either using File integrity monitoring or use of Linux diff command. Common exploit for a vulnerable web server is to upload a crypto miner, misusing the server's CPU resources to try to obtain new cryptocurrency. The cryptojacking that we've been talking about for a while now. You can use Linux utilities such as top and free to diagnose excessive CPU and memory resource consumption by such malware. Cool. Macros and Visual Basic for applications. A document macro is a sequence of actions performed in context of a word processor, spreadsheet, or presentation file. While the user may be able to record macro steps using the GUI, ultimately macros are coded in a scripting language. Microsoft Office uses the Visual Basic for applications language, while PDF documents use JavaScript. Microsoft Office document macros can be inspected using Alt F11. Other vendors and open source software also implement macro functionality using languages such as BASIC or Python. A malicious actor will try to use a macro-enabled document to execute arbitrary code. For example, a Word document could be the vector for executing a malicious PowerShell script. Macros are disabled by default in Office, but the attacker may be able to use a social engineering attack to get the user to change the policy. With PDF, the JavaScript might be embedded within the document and designed to exploit a known vulnerability in the reader software to execute without authorization. Well, all right, I have got to go, guys. I'm gonna go get some food. I'm kind of hungry. I'm fatty, I know. Anyways, yeah, that's great. This is really frustrating, though. I should get more on my learning plan for today. I'll probably be back for more. Anyways, I'll see you guys later. Have a great day. Bye.